All right. So Erica, we're gonna get into it today. We're gonna help people get out of shitty relationships.
Yep, that's exactly what we're gonna do.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I would love for you to just begin by telling your story. I will tell also my story. People know my story mostly, but there's pieces of it that I haven't told, so I'll just tell those. But I want you to start with you and
Yeah,
yeah, how we came together to have this conversation.
yeah, I would love to. I actually I reached out to Isha and said, "I think, we need to have a conversation, and I wanna be on your podcast." And what was really coming up for me was just this, like, so many people, women, I feel like are disproportionately affected by this, are, like, trapped in these relationships, in these marriages because financially they're dependent,
Mm,
and that was my experience.
yeah.
I lost myself for over a decade in a marriage and in a relationship where I had relinquished all financial control, even though prior to that, I was on a good track. I didn't have student loans, I didn't go to college. I knew how to use credit cards where I wasn't carrying balances, and I was almost, like, not obsessive about it, but I was, like, really careful about it because my parents instilled that fear, like, "You don't go too far into debt, and you don't." I was like, "Okay, I won't do
Right,
that.
right.
I'm not gonna do that," and, like, I had gone to school to become a hairstylist. I was in my career by, like, the age of 20, so I was, doing my thing, making money, building my life, and then I met my now ex-husband when I was 22, and I was still, still doing my thing. I didn't jump into anything, but when I got married and then our finances combined, it was like, "Okay," and he was on the opposite end of the spectrum of, like, financial just knowledge and, all of that, and gambler by nature.
Mm,
Um, so I remember, like, taking loans out in my name to help him with his business and using my credit because it was so good, and then I became a financially dependent stay-at-home mom. When I was 29, I got diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, and that, like, really put an end to my career. It had been years of pain, and I had already been stepping back, and at that point, I was like, "Okay, well, I'm gonna just do this. I'm gonna stop working. I'm gonna help my ex-husband with his business, and see what happens." And then I got pregnant, and then it was like, "Okay, well, I'm not gonna, like, go seek out a new job, career, whatever." And the idea of being a stay-at-home mom was so glorified. I was
mm,
like, "This is gonna be good." Um, I it was not good for me at all. I fell pretty deep into postpartum depression and just like, who am I? What is my life? I
right.
felt like I had no control over it. And then I had no control over finances and money. And what was once this like, oh yeah, I'm on track became, whoa, what is this chaos? I
So
couldn't take control of it even if I wanted to.
I was gonna ask about that. Yeah, what was happening there?
The nature of my ex-husband's business, was very chaotic. He buys and sells stuff, essentially.
Yeah.
Antiques, sells on eBay. It's feast or famine.
Okay.
It's very unpredictable, especially when you're dealing with somebody who is a bit compulsive.
Yeah.
So it became this I had no idea what was coming in or out. So much of his business was cash. Um, and he'd be making these big investments in buying stuff, 'cause that buying stuff to resell, and I'm like, "I hate stuff, this is overwhelming to me."
Oh, wow, yes.
Um, and it'd be like, "Oh, I spent $10,000 on this storage unit."
Oh my
Like,
God.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Whoa, wait, huh?" And I would try to, give my input, because 'cause I'm an intelligent person and I'm seeing what's happening. I'm involved in the business at this point, like, it's what I was doing, I was helping him with it, and I'm like, "This none of this really makes sense."
Yeah.
And then we would argue over that, like, he's like, "Well, I need help, why don't you take over?" I'm like, "I can't unless you do, like, X, Y, and Z, like, I can't just take over this chaos without your help."
Yeah.
and I can't take over when you're also not giving me access to like your credit cards and stuff like that. Like, what are you trying to hide too, right?
Mm.
So I felt completely out of control of all of it, and I hated it. I hated it. All while also then navigating like new motherhood
Yeah.
and everything that comes with that, and money being used like as power and control. Like, well, I'm the one that makes the money, so therefore my time was never as valuable because I was not producing an income.
Right. And I mean, that's straight up, when you talk about the use of your credit to open up, to take loans or open lines of credit, like that is financial abuse. And we often, like, say, we don't often attach that phrase to those kinds of behaviors, but like, let's call it for what it is, because we think, oh, well, we're just helping each other out. And sometimes there's other intentions underneath it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've noticed now that like I need things very simple and like straightforward. And that was the opposite of what was happening.
Hmm.
And then when I finally decided to leave for the fourth time, like anybody out there contemplating divorce and feel like, oh, why is it like I should just leave? They did. It took me 4 tries. It's not this easy thing,
Yeah.
especially if you're financially dependent. So I finally got to the point, it was like end of 2020, where it didn't matter. I needed to get out. And I had to lean into trusting myself. It wasn't a matter of self love. I had already done quite a bit of work up until that point, which is what kind of like got me to the place of being like, okay, no, I can really leave now. But the financial piece, I'm like, I got 2 kids. I'm not making much of an income. I had started my business, but it was not generating much. But I'm like, I have to just trust myself to figure it out because I cannot stay in this
Right.
a moment longer.
Yeah.
And that's what I've been doing, figuring it
Wow.
out as I go.
Wow. Yes, yes.
Hmm.
Yeah. And as you were talking about like being trapped in a relationship, being financially dependent, what the other side of that is that oftentimes, and this happened to me, is that I didn't believe that I could survive financially without my partner. Even
Hmm.
though I was making, for a long time, I was the sole income earner. But at the time that I was contemplating divorce, he was making really good money. And so I thought, I cannot possibly, like, we live month to month and look at all the money he's making, and it's like, where's it going? But it was because it wasn't managed well. And so I had this distorted understanding of what I was capable of on my own. And when I left, I actually made more money. It was just
Look at
really
that.
interesting.
Hmm. Yeah.
So there's an internal distortion. There is the reality of being financially dependent. If you don't have income coming in and your partner does, and they're kind of like, they're using that strategically. And
Hmm.
then there's our distortion around like what we are capable of, what we are able to earn without our partners.
Yeah. And then if you have a partner who is verbally abusive, saying to you, you will
Right.
never make it without me. I will
Yes.
never forget the
Yes.
day. I remember where I was standing, probably what I was wearing when he said, "You will never make it without me. You will end up in a cardboard box on the street."
Oh my gosh.
And I believed it.
Yeah.
I didn't want to believe it, but I was like, "Ooh, he's probably right." Forgetting that up until that point, because let's see, I had my oldest child when I was 30, and she well, it's been almost 4 years since I like said we're getting a divorce. But it's like I totally forgot about that whole lifetime I lived before that where I was doing it on my own. Like I moved out when I was 18. I was paying my bills. I had an apartment. I had a job, like all the things.
Right.
Yet all of the abuse and the just you start to think like, what reality am I even living in? And oh, he's probably right. And anytime I read it like a new book, because, I was like doing my healing and doing my personal development work and all of that. And he was threatened by it. Anytime I read a new book, it's like, you can't think for yourself. And I was like, maybe I can't. And you start questioning it. And I'll never forget that same day when he said that, I received a message from, I don't know if I had worked with her. I may have a mentor coach that I had worked with. And in her voice note, she was like, "You're a thought leader." And I'm like, wait a minute, but I have this voice in my ear telling me I can't think for myself. I'm going to
Uh-huh.
end up in a cardboard box on the street that I can't do it without him. And it's like, wait a minute, what is true? What, like, it's
Yeah.
such a disorienting thing
Yes.
to
Yes.
experience.
Yes. It is essentially gaslighting, right? It's like
Yeah.
it hijacks your reality and
Mhm.
inserts doubt where there is trust, right?
Yeah.
Where there could be trust. It is like the question marks around, can you? Are you able to? Or can you really? You
Mhm.
know?
And then you start like looking for that evidence that that's true, that you can't.
Right, right. And we mess things up all the time. And so it's like the evidence is everywhere. And we're not seeing the evidence of the trust. And then we just, like you said, you took the leap.
Mhm.
You leaned into trust, just like you said, fuck it.
Yeah, I had to. It was such a there's no fucking way I could do this for a minute longer.
Yeah,
I don't care that I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. I'm gonna fucking figure it out.
yeah,
And I'm also incredibly fortunate to have a support network,
yeah,
a family
yeah.
who they wanted me out just as badly as I
Uh,
wanted to get out at that
yes,
point. Um, and I knew that I at least knew I'd have a place to live, because
yes,
that's the very real thing for so many people who are financially dependent. It's like, I'm
yeah,
choosing homelessness or
yeah,
staying.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. You knew that you were, at least the cardboard box piece was not going to be your future.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I did. I had to be like, all right, it's time to just trust yourself. And like I said, my business was making some money, but I was primary caregiver of a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. And
yeah,
that is like in an abusive marriage that was just destroying me.
yeah.
But it was like, no, it's time to just trust yourself. It didn't work out like I thought it would, of course. In my brain, I'm like, okay, we're getting a divorce. We're gonna like self-file because I was delusional at the time, because like that's what happens. And I'm just gonna start taking over the bills and he'll move out.
Mm.
That did not happen at all because I was dealing with somebody who did not want to accept the
Right.
divorce and who had the power with the money,
Yes.
and he wouldn't move out. And it
Mm,
would be back and forth between him being remorseful, "I'm sorry, I already put you through enough just until you get on your feet, like, I don't want you to worry about it." But all of that was the underlying, "Well, I'll show her and she'll wanna stay."
mm.
Because then when I would be like, "No, I'm still leaving," it was this cycle of abuse. For a year, I got out with a restraining order. Like,
Oh,
that is
wow.
how
Yes,
I
yes,
was
yes.
able to leave. So here I was thinking I was gonna take over the house, which was a rental. Like, it's not like my kids grew whatever. And instead, I ended up leaving and going to stay with family, which ended up being exactly what I needed
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah,
to take on it was a rental, but it was still a whole house.
yeah.
And that was a lot of pressure. So I'm like, okay, I have time to like breathe. And people still find it strange, like, if I talk about not getting child support and not getting alimony, they're like, "Why? Why wouldn't you, like" I'm like, "When you've had somebody use money to try to control you,
Exactly, exactly.
you don't want their money."
You don't want any energetic tie to that person, especially not financial.
Yep.
Yeah, you
Especially
would
after he
rather starve.
always used that.
Exactly.
Always. So I'm like, I don't he's supposed to pay me child support, but do I fight it? No, because the kids are with him half the time. I'm in a co-parenting situation.
Yeah,
Fine. But the headache that it would cause me and the abuse it would lead to is not worth it.
exactly, exactly.
And I remember my lawyer saying, like, "Are you sure you don't want alimony?" I'm like, "No, because
Yeah.
first of all, we're dealing with a very chaotic feast or famine." And the way I looked at it was like, it's always a scramble to pay the bills. He's super stressed out about it, always. The impact of that means he's more of an asshole. My
Mm,
kids are gonna have to deal with that.
yes.
I don't want them to. So I'm just gonna figure it out on my own. And that's what I've been doing, is just figuring it out, which ironically he hates to hear me say because it's so hard for him. He's
Yeah.
like, "You're over here just saying you're just gonna figure it out." I'm like, "Well,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Because you're
I
trusting.
I trust myself." And here I am, 2 years. I've been in my apartment 2 years now, and I have figured it out month
Yes.
after month.
Yes. Yes. Oh my gosh. And you and I had a separate conversation where we acknowledged that, how long were you with your ex-husband?
Let's see, I met him when I was 22. It's been 4 years, so 30, 14 years.
Yeah. So 14 years. I was 14 years as well, 15. And in that time, right, when you're with someone long enough, you begin to adopt their energetic relationship to money, especially if you've relinquished control. It's like you're going with their money flow,
Mhm.
right? And so I think that's really important for listeners to hear that sometimes we can even doubt ourselves, like if we are going through feast and famine cycles in a relationship, or when you're wondering like where the fuck did my paycheck go, right? All of those things, and you were responsible before, you had your life together before, you were able to stay out of debt before, and you're wondering, why is this happening now? Like, I don't get it. I'm making more money and I have less, or it's feeling crunchy. It's like sometimes if when we relinquish control, we just go with somebody else's flow. And that
Mhm.
isn't necessarily like we're not owning our money flow, our relationship with money. We're not sort of standing in our energy, and then we begin to believe that's our pattern when our money pattern is actually very different.
Yeah. Like, I honestly think money is hard now because of my experience with him, and I don't ever remember feeling like money was hard before.
Exactly, exactly. Like I never had a problem making money.
Right, and never, like, looked at it like this thing. It was never like this massive stressor or this.
Right.
And now, so, like, that is a whole part of, like,
It's money trauma
healing.
within the relationship, right?
Yeah.
When the money's chaotic, you receive that experience as money trauma in real
Mhm.
time.
Yeah, and the struggle. I had a
Yes.
session with a coach, I don't know, it was probably 2 years ago now, and we're, like, imagining me getting off the struggle bus because 'cause I'm like, "Fuck the struggle bus, I don't wanna be on it anymore. I don't even know how I got here, because money was never like this for me." And now it's like this feels like this struggle, this, like, hard thing that controls my life, and I'm like, "No, that's not," because he was always so also with the gambling, nature.
Yes.
And feeling owed. He always feels owed, like, "Oh, I'm owed it now in the world," and he's the victim of everything, and I'm like, "Oh
Yeah.
my god, I totally took all of that on, and it's taking me some time,
Yes, to kind
to
of
get away
peel
from
that
it."
off.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly, exactly.
Yeah, and to like, this feeling of safety with money. Like,
Yes.
money wasn't safe, and for a lot of different reasons for me.
Yeah, exactly, especially if it's used to harm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's then
Or
it's overcoupled. Money is then overcoupled with trauma,
Mhm,
with abuse, right? And then we
mhm,
need to like our trauma healing becomes like separating the two and seeing really like, okay, this was abuse and this was the tool that they used to abuse me,
mhm,
right? They're not one and the same, but they were brought together
mhm.
to create harm.
Yeah. And then just like, yeah, reconciling with that and being like, okay. And I, for a while too, was like, I don't have any money trauma. Like, what even is that? And then it hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, oh, wait. And that was a very real, like, life experience that I
Yeah.
still, when you experience trauma and abuse, you have these moments that stick out to you where you remember exactly where you were, what happened. And I have a lot of those moments,
Yes.
and it's often met with, like, "No, that's not how it happened." I was like, "But no, that is. wait a minute, that is how it happened. And
Yeah.
like one of those moments after I left like my full time doing hair, I was still doing some hair at home. All through my pregnancy, I would go to clients' houses, and then when my daughter was born, I'd wear her in a carrier, like, cutting hair and applying color while she was there, and I'll never forget, like, him losing it on me saying, "This is my money, you have your hair money, and that's it," and I remember thinking, like, that's not even while I am 24/7 taking care of
Wow.
we only had 1 child at the time,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's like, now also like, unraveling the tying of my worth to my ability to produce income.
Yes. Yes.
Like
Yeah. The invisible, unpaid labor of taking care. I just was reading a post just now before we got on about like husbands appreciating their wives, and this is very sort of gender typed, but one partner appreciating the other partner for having taken care of the kids, which allowed them to not have to put money towards daycare so that they could build their business.
mhm,
Right, like that's a real thing, that those
it's
are
a real thing.
thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, like $300,000 was estimated
Yeah,
is
I
the
don't doubt it.
cost. Yeah.
I don't doubt it, and it's the job that you can never turn off,
Yeah,
parenting.
exactly.
Yeah, and when I would say stuff like that, I would be met with, "They're your kids," like, making me feel shameful for being like, "Oh," as if I'm saying I don't wanna take care of my kids. I was like, "No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you 24/7 work, and you don't have to arrange child you don't have to worry about any of that,
Right.
and I feel trapped."
Yeah.
And, "Well, we just bring her with you. You get to do whatever you want. I'm letting you live the life however you want." And I'm like, this isn't how I wanna live my life at all. None of
Right.
this." But the like, well, you're only worthy of time off of from the kids if you're producing income.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
So I have a hard time resting. Not anymore. I've like worked actively on it, but I had a hard time and
Yeah,
not
I
feeling
bet.
like I had to jump up, right? Like, oh my God, I have to look like
Somebody's
I'm
watching
busy.
me sitting on the couch.
Yeah. And I'm like, damn. Or this, I had to like kind of set some boundaries in the beginning because now it's 50-50, and he all of a sudden was thrust into parenting
Yeah. Okay.
while running his business, still can't acknowledge what I did
Yeah.
because he struggled for a while. And I'd be over here like, okay, he'd ask, "Oh, can you take the kids?" This and that. I'm like, "Well, it's your day." And in my head, I'm like, "Oh, if he knew that I wasn't working, he'd be like, 'How dare you not take them? I'm the one making the money.'" So if we had stayed together, it would have always been that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
It
Exactly.
never would have changed. So I often will say, like, "No, I can't. I'm working," even if I'm not.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you. I hear you. So tell me this, Erica.
Mhm.
When you did you have like an escape or an exit plan in place?
No, I
Okay.
didn't. And
Okay.
I'm reminded of a conversation I had with my former boss when I was doing hair. I don't even know if it was after I got married or not, but I remember her talking about having like secret bank accounts and like you better have it's like your fuck it fund, like you're
Hmm.
get the fuck out.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know what's going on in your marriage, but mine's fine. I remember having that thought, like, "Who are you to tell me?" Looking back, she's a brilliant businesswoman, and she had us even though I worked off commission in a hair salon, there aren't benefits usually. She had us setting up retirement accounts. The one that I cashed out last year, I set up when I was working for her. At, like, 23, I set that up. So I was
Yeah.
poised to be, like, good, but I
Yeah.
remember her saying that, and I'm like, "No." I'm fine. And I was also working at the time, so it's like I didn't think I needed it. Now, I highly recommend women, people, anybody who is especially if you are financially dependent, like start stashing away money.
Yeah. How do you recommend they do that?
Like it's kind of tricky, I guess, if you're in like a safety concern as well.
Mhm.
To have I don't even honestly, I don't even know. An
Yeah.
envelope of cash?
I had an envelope of cash, Erica.
Yeah.
I had an envelope of cash in my downtown office,
Mm-hmm.
and it was basically full of the cash co-payments I received from clients. And there was about, I ended up like I had $500 in there worth of
Mm-hmm.
it's just like $20 bills and things like that.
Yep.
And that gave me such comfort. And I would deposit that. I'm like, did I deposit it in a separate bank account? I feel like I deposited into a secret SEP IRA that I had going on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I needed to feel like I had something set aside, even if it was like an IRA that I wasn't going to be able to touch anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But that gave me comfort. And I remember officially opening the IRA after we were like legally separated. And I was like, okay, so now we're legally separated. Now this is my IRA. Like this is not yours. This is not a joint IRA. This is mine. And
Mm-hmm.
even then he like made threats to get half of it, claiming that, it was his. And I basically the money that he made enabled me to save the money that I saved to put in the, and I was like, no,
Mm-hmm.
no. Thankfully, my lawyer and his lawyer did not pay attention to that at all. But yeah, like I was stashing and I stashed for 2 years. I basically had money piled up that I then put in the IRA. And that was basically that gave me, for some reason, even though that was not liquid money, it
Mm-hmm.
gave me the foundation to be like, almost like I'm an adult and I have some like established funds somewhere, right? Like I was doing like big girl stuff and I
Mm-hmm.
was managing my own money for the first time. Like it just felt like a step
Yeah.
in the right direction. Um, yeah. And, divorce costs a lot of money. Like even people who have full-time jobs, let's say, when they go through the divorce process, it's thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars,
Mm-hmm.
you
I
know?
got I got so lucky
Yeah.
um with my lawyer. I I've been really intentional about just cultivating a really amazing network of support, which
Yeah.
is one of the ways we survive divorce.
Aha. There you go.
So I had my people, I knew who to reach out to. Like my girl Brittany, I texted her, I'm like, I need a lawyer. And she's like, I got you. Don't worry. She's like, here's the number, call him. And what I was like, okay. And I did. I called that day and I'm like, I remember calling kind of panicked because it was more like I need to know my rights like right at this moment because the day I asked for a divorce, my ex turned parental controls on my phone,
Oh,
which I had just gotten on his phone plan. I was milking that family plan with my parents for a long time, and I had just gotten on his plan months earlier.
yeah.
And I woke up to a text and I was like, parental controls. I was like, nope, we're not doing this. And I went, marched myself right down to Verizon, got my own phone plan, made it happen. I downgraded my phone,
Yeah.
downgraded everything because I'm like, I need this. I got rid of my phone number of 20 years. This is how I was like getting my
Yes.
independence. And I took over that bill and all of that. But I called the lawyer that day and, the assistant or she answered and she's like, actually, let me ask who's calling and let him know because I was trying to schedule an appointment. She puts me on hold and he comes onto the phone and he's like, Brittany told me if I didn't help you out, she'd fucking kill me. So what do you got for me? I'm like, oh, okay, that's what I like to hear. So he used to do flat rate divorces.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Um, and he offered to do that and give me a deal.
Wow.
So luckily too, like me and my ex, it wasn't logistically, there wasn't a lot to separate. It
Yeah.
wasn't awful.
Yeah.
It was crazy. And my lawyer was like, what in the actual fuck? Like, I'm like, sorry, Vin, but like you signed up for this. You signed up for this. But I got really lucky with that. And I don't take it for granted because I needed him. I really did. And I'm like, wow, this could have cost me like so much more.
Mm-hmm.
But I build relationships with people from the place of knowing we get to thrive,
Yes.
not
Yes.
just survive. So that is constantly when I'm like trying to think about how can I thrive? Like I'm worthy of it. I get to. In
Mm-hmm.
divorce, I mean, it is. life altering and exhausting and costs money and time, so much time.
Yeah.
And I know for a while that was keeping me from actually doing it
Yeah.
until I recognized the thought of staying became way scarier
Yes.
than the thought of anything it would take to leave.
Yes. Exactly. That's the tipping point.
Mhm.
Yeah. And because you had such good credit, were you entangled with him that way, like in your debt?
Yeah, I had opened a few credit cards in my name when we were planning our wedding, because right, makes so much sense to go into debt for a wedding, something I will never do again. Um, and I want to say like we had one personal loan, but that was paid off. My car, I don't know what he was thinking that day, but we go to buy this car. My daughter was 4 months old, and he was like, "Yeah, no, like we can afford it." He wanted to buy the nicer one. But we're gonna put it in your name. Like, it was just in my name. I have no idea why he wanted to do that,
Yeah.
but it served me well when I went to sell it. Even though during the divorce, even though it was technically in my name, it's still both of ours.
Yes.
And I had gotten to the point where I'm like, I need to sell this car. It's a $630 a month car payment.
Oh, wow.
And if I'm over here trying to get my financial independence back and take
Yeah.
over bills, this is not an important bill.
Yeah.
So my lawyer's like, you have to get permission from him. And I'm like, "Ah, okay." At this point, we had a restraining order. We weren't supposed to be communicating, but
Yeah.
he relentlessly texts anyways. But I had to ask him, and he was like, "Do whatever you want." Okay. So I sold him because the end of 2021, yeah, it was the end of 2021. Used car prices were like pretty high. And I was like, "Oh shit. I owe less on this than what it's worth." I'm like, this might be a really smart move, right? If I'm trying to relieve financial pressure. I remember I owed 15 grand on it still, and it was worth about 22,000. So I'm like, okay, all right, I'm gonna sell it. And once I decide something, like, good luck changing my mind. But he gave me his permission technically, but I didn't have it in writing. And the day I went to sell it, because I had put it on like Marketplace and I had decided that December, that car payment was going to be the last one I paid, that the next one would be paying it off. I'd never sold a car before. I didn't know what the fuck I was doing, but I'm like, I'm going to figure it out. And selling a car that has a loan still out, it's not easy to do privately.
Yeah.
Like you have to there's a lot of trust that would be needed.
Yeah.
But I get an email after I turned down a few offers. Somebody offered me 18,000. I'm like, no, 22 is my number. I'm not moving from it. I get an email from a car dealership. Would you take 22? Yep, sure will. And from a car dealership?
Yeah. Hell
So
yeah.
easy. He's like, when can you come down? I'm like, I can come down today. My dad was home. He could watch the kids. And I went down there and I remember my dad saying like, "No, he's probably gonna try to talk you down." I was like, "I'm not. It's 22,000. I'm not. That's what it is." And I get there, he does like a quick once over of my car, and he's like, "All right, let's go and do the paperwork." And I was like, "Oh, 22,000?" He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Okay." And since my ex-husband's name was not on any of it, I could sign that paperwork no problem.
Wow.
And I sold it that day, which I did not think was actually going to happen. And I called my aunt who it was an SUV that I had, and I had all the kids' stuff in it. I didn't clean it out. I call my aunt who has like the smallest car ever, and I'm like, "Can you come pick me up? I just sold my car." And she's like, "Yeah, yeah, okay." And then I had like 7 grand. So I bought a used car for 5,000.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
And
And
when
now
I
you
say
don't
it
have a
pisses my
car payment.
ex-husband off, no car payment, it's the most beautiful thing in the world. I remember I told you my dream car is one without a car payment. I don't give a shit what it is. I drive a 10-year-old Kia Soul and I fucking love it. And it just I mean, it's a little sweeter too because that's the car I've always wanted. Like, I know, my real bougie taste, right? But my ex-husband hated them, so he wouldn't let me get one. But yeah, and that I mean, that pressure I took off by selling my car. My car insurance is cheaper, my car taxes, I have no car payment, gas, all of those things.
Yeah.
Because my goal once I got out was like, all right, I gotta like figure this out. Why don't I figure out ways to like lessen the load of what I have to pay for? And
Yeah.
that was a huge one, huge.
Yeah. That is really ingenious. And as you were sharing your story, I was thinking about like this whole trust process, right? I feel like so much about money is internal safety, right?
Mhm,
Like feeling like you're a safe person to receive money, that you can like handle it, manage it, that you feel confident. And then there's a trust that there's enough, that if it leaves your account, there's also money that's going to come into your account. Like there's a
mhm,
circulation there, right? And as I'm hearing your story, I just see so many opportunities for you to like where you could anchor into trust of like, yes, this shit happened where the car was in my name, but actually it ended up being a blessing over here,
mhm.
and it paid you out over here.
He did. And
So
he's now the only thing I have to hear is him telling me I got a free car because I left with nothing. I left with what I could fit in my car.
wow.
I didn't want anything. Again, his business, there's lots of tangible stuff. And if I
Yes.
wanted, I could have had my lawyer do a whole like valuation. We're talking a warehouse full of stuff. It would have been a nightmare. And I could have been like, half is mine and half would have been mine.
Yeah.
And I was like, nope, I just want my freedom
Yes.
however I can get it. And I don't want that. So I have to remember I don't need to defend myself to him when he says that shit. Like, well, you got a free car, must be nice and blah blah. And I'm like, I know the reality. I know the reality that I was the primary caregiver of the kids, the stay-at-home mom, income, like all of that. I did not get a free car.
Yeah, that shit ain't free. That shit for
No.
sure ain't free. Oh my God,
Um,
no.
And at one point, when we finally got in front of a judge, because it was drawn out, the divorce, and I think because of like COVID and just the backup,
Yeah.
and because my ex was so kind of off the walls, the judge was like, "What's the holdup here? Is it over $3,500?" Because he was arguing half of that $7,000.
Yes. Yes.
And he looks at him, he goes, "Do you want to get divorced today?" And he was like, "Well, yeah, yeah, I do." And I'm like, I do. I really, 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 really want to." They all stayed late. The judge stayed late, my lawyer, everybody stayed late that day to make it happen because it's like, this is absurd to drag this out
Wow.
at this point.
Yeah.
And I walked out of their divorce that day and I was like, holy shit.
Hmm. Hmm.
And freedom isn't that instant when you walk out in your divorce. Like, it's been a lot
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
recover from, but it's the trust, like
Yeah.
just trusting myself to figure it out and leaning on so much support.
Yes. Right. Like I think that's something that I really want listeners to take with them is that going through a divorce is financially devastating, and it's mostly financially devastating to women, right? Not only, yes, there's a lot of cases where women earn more than men, but in a lot of cases that where there is some aspect of abuse or control, it tends not to be the case, and that trusting that everything's going to be okay and like leaning into those supports, like having a support system, like letting people know I'm thinking about getting a divorce, and like getting as much help as possible, like letting yourself, because in an abusive relationship, you feel so isolated, right? You doubt yourself. And we
Mhm.
need people to reflect what's possible back to us, because that's when we least believe it, is like right before taking the leap, is like we're like, is this going to work out? Am I going to crash and burn?
Yeah,
Is everything that he said true?
yeah.
And so those other people that are around you are there to tell you like, no, you're going to be more than okay. Like, I've got you. I
Mhm.
have resources, right? Like, we don't do this in a vacuum, in a social vacuum, for sure. That's not the way to do this.
And I needed to hear that often. that,
Yeah.
"No, you can trust yourself. You've got this."
Yeah.
Like, I needed to hear it a whole lot. There were many a days that I was like, "I can't fucking do this, and I'm tired, and I don't wanna do it,
Yeah.
and I should just, like, give up." And then
Yeah.
it's those voices, and we live in this, like, culture where it's shameful to ask for financial support.
Mhm.
Like, it hurts my heart when I see people posting on social media, like, "I'm not usually one to ask for a handout, and I work really hard for everything I have," like, trying to justify it,
Yeah.
and then also saying, "And also, I'm struggling right now." I'm like, it's, like,
Yeah.
I know if I have the financial means and somebody I care about needs help, I'll happy
Exactly.
to
Exactly.
give it to them, and I actually, I shared this because I know it's helpful and permission giving to ask for support. I reached out to my online community twice to get my rent paid. The
Mm.
first time was July of 2021. I was still we were still living together. It was my summer of hell,
Yeah.
because he really went off the deep end during the divorce and
Yeah.
things amplified like I could never have imagined. Um, and it was the same day I hired my lawyer, but he had gotten home from the casino, middle of a Sunday afternoon.
Oh,
I don't know
wow.
if he was drunk, something was up though.
Yeah.
And he says to me and the kids, he threw his phone out of the car window on the highway because he doesn't need it. And then he looks at me and he's like, and I drained the bank account. Good luck paying rent.
Oh my god.
And I was like, okay. And it was like July 9th. And me, I'm like, I only have till the 10th. Like, I'm only allowed to pay, like, right.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? How am I going to do this? What am I going to do? And I was like, this is really uncomfortable, but I have this platform. I have these people who care about me, who um I also pour into, like I show up
Yeah.
for my people.
Yeah.
So I made a post and you know what? I got my rent paid.
Wow.
I was like somebody sent me like 500 bucks and I had to be like I don't have to feel guilty about this. I don't even have to say like, "Oh, I owe you." Like, no, I get to just receive this
Yes.
because I am human and I am worthy of that.
Yeah.
And I had women reach out like, "Thank you for doing that." Like, I always feel bad when I have to. And then I had to do it again. I moved in my apartment June of 2022, and I
Wow.
moved in on hopes and dreams. My bank accounts, nobody would have ever been like, "Oh, yeah, you seem like a stable tenant." No. I was like, "But I decide and I make it happen."
Yeah.
And it worked out. Um, I literally signed the lease and then 2 days later came up with the money to actually move in, but they didn't know
Wow.
that. So and I launched a new program, but July hits and I was like, "Oh shit, here I am again." Like, I don't even know how the fuck I'm gonna pay my rent, and I was still paying all my credit card bills.
Yes.
And I was in the parking lot of the police department because I was about to go in there and file, because he had violated the protective order.
Yeah.
In front of the parking lot, I did it again. I was like, "Oh, I hate doing this," but I didn't even say that I hated doing it, and I was just like, "I need help. I need to get my rent paid. I don't know," like and I did it again. Got my rent was paid, and
Wow.
again, it was just, I get to do that. I get to receive. And I would happily like I shared with you, I think one of the things I would love to do when I got, like, stacked up bank accounts, I wanna just call and pay off people's credit cards. Like, I don't even give a fuck about getting a tax write-off for donations. I wanna give money directly to the people
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
need it, like
Yeah.
I once did.
Yeah.
Um, and
That's
yeah, and that was
beautiful.
also I shortly after that, I stopped paying my credit card bills because I
Mm.
needed to keep a
Yeah.
roof over my head.
Yeah.
And a month ago, I filed bankruptcy, and best decision I could have made for myself.
And how is that helping you now? Like, what is that doing for you, that process of filing for bankruptcy?
It it relieves so much pressure,
Yeah.
first of all. Um, I intentionally stopped paying my credit card bills. It was a very like, okay, what's the worst case scenario? Worst case scenario, I get sued and I have to pay it all back and then some. I'm like, okay, but that's not happening tomorrow. So I'll buy myself some time. And if they're not going to put me in jail, I'm not going to be afraid of that.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, I'm going to see if I can like dispute all of this and like not have to go the bankruptcy route. And I tried that for a little bit. And then I was like, I need to be done. I need to not think about this anymore. I did get sued. One of the credit card companies sued
Yeah.
me. One ended up in collections. Two were just kind of like floating out there.
Yeah.
And they try to make you scared, right? So I
Yes.
get served with papers. My mom calls me because they went to her house because that's the
Yes.
address they had. And she calls me and she's like, the court marshal was just here. And I was like, yeah, thinking it was for my ex. She goes, for you. And I like thought for a second, like, what would I be getting served with? I was like, oh, credit card. And she's like, yeah, are you okay? Like, we can help you. Like, do you want to like a payment plan? I was like, nope, we're not doing any of that. We're not panicking. We're not acting right from that place of fear.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what they want you to do. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm going to trust that this is going to work out. Not for nothing. I'll get in front of a judge someday and be like, listen, this is why I stopped paying my credit cards and all of that. And if they still want to say you still owe it, then the judge has to sleep with that decision and I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But then earlier this year, I was like, I think I need to just not think about this anymore and just look into bankruptcy.
Mm-hmm.
And the lawyer I talked to, I immediately knew I was like, yeah, this is what I need to do.
Okay.
It's a tool.
How do you, what kind of, yeah, how do you use that tool?
So I filed chapter 7. There's different ones. Chapter
Okay.
7 is basically wipes out all of your debt. You are not responsible to pay it back.
Okay.
You have to qualify. Like I don't
Yeah.
know like what qualifies you for it, but I'm assuming if I was making a ton of money and still would they'd be like, no.
Got it.
And then I think there's like chapter 11, you pay some of it back, but like on a payment plan,
Yes.
no exactly.
Yes.
But chapter 7 fully wipes it out. However, you have to know that if you are left an inheritance within 6 months of filing, it belongs to the bankruptcy trustee,
Okay.
which was an important thing. Like I knew that I have a family member who is leaving me things,
Yeah.
house, this type of thing. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay, I have to like have that. It's an awkward, uncomfortable conversation, but like just in case.
Yeah.
And honestly, the process was just a matter of me gathering financial information. So for me, P&Ls, because I don't have a W-2,
Yeah.
um, any like notices from creditors, the addresses. It wasn't too bad, but you know, it's a checklist of stuff that like I needed a deadline, otherwise I wouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
And then I met with the lawyer, we went through all of it, signed it, and now I do have my hearing is next week to just finalize it all. But once it was filed, my credit score started going up.
Wow.
I don't know if it'll stay that way, but I mean, my credit was down to like 500,
Yeah.
which also reminder, like it's all made up, credit scores and all that. So
Totally.
don't
It's
judge your
totally
worth on
made
it.
up. Yes. Totally not. It's made up, and it's like part of the reason my credit is still as low as it is. Even I don't have any debt. I have one debt that was from my ex-husband, but yeah, I don't have credit cards.
Yeah,
And so you need to have a credit card to
for
build up your
credit.
debt. I'm just like, I don't want a credit card.
I
And
don't think I want one now.
yeah, it's kind of a trap. It's a trap.
Yeah. And it sucks that like so much is dependent on our credit score, which is crazy, only in
Yeah.
America. Um, but I recently decided too, because I've lived without credit cards now. I stopped paying them 2 years ago. So I don't think I ever want one again. Like I kind of want to just like, no, I just want cash to buy the things. Oh, and the bankruptcy lawyer, this is something that's important to remember too.
Yeah.
Like for me, when I filed bankruptcy, like I said, I was not using credit cards. There are people, if you're using credit cards and that is something you depend on and you file bankruptcy, you now don't have access to that. And that can be like a
Got it. Got
scary
it. Yes.
thing.
Yeah.
Um, so the less we can depend on credit cards,
Yeah.
the better. And also, I get it, everything's expensive and credit cards are like a lifeline for
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, and obviously you can use, credit cards to your benefit. Like if you have a points, travel points credit
Mhm.
card, right? You can like you pay it off immediately. You're just like racking up the points. So
Mhm.
there's ways to use them where you can get really creative and get like paid back
Mhm.
essentially. But overall, like it is a, you know, I feel like it is a way to get us in the debt system.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, you get sent credit card things in the mail, like, oh, you have this much credit, and
Mhm.
like all those invitations, and then in a moment of desperation, you're just like, okay, yes, Capital One, like let's go.
Yep.
And then you've got 25%,
Yeah.
interest on that debt.
I heard something in you have to take a credit counseling course when you
Yeah.
file bankruptcy. And in
Okay.
the one after you file, he was talking about credit cards and how when banks introduced them, they specifically started like essentially marketing them like these are good to have in case of emergency. He's like, and that's
uh,
actually the worst mindset to have. To finance your emergency, we should be teaching people how to save cash for that.
right,
But it was
emergency fund.
intentional.
Yes.
So now we think, oh, we need, because I've had people even say, like, how do you live without credit cards? That would make me nervous. And I'm like, it did at first,
Yeah.
because we do think, we need them for an emergency when actually that is not the
Right.
best mindset to have
Yeah.
around
You
credit
need an
cards.
emergency fund is what you need.
Mhm.
3 months worth of an emergency fund, or
Mhm.
worth 3 months worth of your expenses, right? To cover your
Yeah,
expenses.
yeah.
So yeah, so we're up on the hour of word to
Mhm.
close the conversation. And I just like I feel like we could continue because it's like there's so much more to the story, and it's still unfolding, right?
Mhm.
For
Yeah,
you. And we'll have to invite you back to
we could do a part
continue.
two.
Yeah,
I'd love
yeah,
to.
exactly.
I always got something to say.
But I wanted to, you are a really highly skilled life coach, and I want to let people know where they can find you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. Um, my favorite place to play is still on Facebook. I post most of my content there. I work with people one-on-one and in my body image program, which is a year-long thing, which will change your whole fucking life.
Yes.
So yeah, find me on Facebook. I'm on Instagram as well, but you'll get most of
Yeah.
my juicy nuggets of wisdom on Facebook.
Yeah. And just for the listeners, like your approach to body image is just totally different than anything else I've seen.
Mhm. Oh, thank you
It's
for that
really,
reflection because it
yeah,
really
yeah.
is.
It really resonates with me because it's like it's been my journey to sort of go the body neutrality versus
Yes.
body positivity.
Yeah.
And so that's been really helpful in your content.
Yeah. And like with body image, yes, it's a personal, individual thing. And also, it's a whole collective thing. And my approach is yes, we want to work on our own. And also, let's look at the big picture and how this is affecting us all as a
Yes.
whole and what
Yes.
we can do to like shift away from that.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.